Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. You're just joining me after Christmas. I hope you had a great time and I'm wishing you a very happy new year. Now I'm slowly catching up to some of the goodies that I saved up for Christmas, and today's figure is one that I've long wanted to get my hands on since I missed it first time around. So this was actually a Christmas present for me and I'm finally going to share my thoughts with you today on the B&M exclusive reissue of Emperor Davros. And before we get into the review today, I just wanted to set some context for you in case you're wondering what all the fuss is about and why am I so excited about this reissue. Well, the reason is because this figure was released only once before by Character Options a very long time ago. It was part of a special release. It came with this destroyed Dalek, as you can see here, and these sold like hotcakes, and they've since become very difficult to track down, and they fetch some incredible prices on the secondary market. So finally we get a budget version, a second chance to pick up Emperor Davros. And for me, this is really exciting because Remembrance of the Daleks is one of my all-time favourite Doctor Who stories, and I really love this version of Davros because it's such a different design for the character. Okay, with that being said, let's take a look at the packaging. Now, this is really very small packaging. This is probably the smallest B&M exclusive Doctor Who packaging we've ever had because it is just one figure, although it's slightly oversized for a typical Dalek. That's basically what you're getting here, is a very small little box. It features the new branding and new design that we've seen in some of the more recent releases over the past year or so. I happen to really like it. I really like the use of the blue and the yellow and the white. I think it works really well. It makes this look quite attractive, and the colours just are a lot brighter and more colourful to me. So I really like this. I'm not so keen on the plastic that they use. They don't have a plastic window. You can put your hands right through, and there is sort of like a plastic mould that keeps the figure in place. I'm not as keen on that, and I'll explain that a little bit more in a moment. But if we look at the side panel, there's not really a lot going on here. This is kind of bland and a bit disappointing, and it's a shame because it is actually quite a good space, and I would have much preferred if they actually had an image of the character taken from the show. That would have been really cool, but alas, it wasn't meant to be. And if we look at the back of the packaging again, we're seeing this novel approach that Character Options take to their Doctor Who releases, where they have an awful lot of text about the show or the story, sometimes behind the scenes stuff, and that's what they've done here. So it's very text heavy. Again, I probably would have preferred to actually just go for an image because I think it's more displayable, but hey, I think this is still a novel and interesting approach. On the interior card, we have this very cool printed design which actually replicates the Dalek control room that we see from the Dalek mothership in Remembrance of the Daleks. I think this is really very cool. Sadly, it is a little bit obfuscated by this plastic mold that I was talking about, and the other issue I have here is that in order to get this out, you kind of have to really wedge and pull the plastic free to release the figure, and this tends to tear this backdrop, which is a real shame because this is a nice mini diorama that you could use, but unless you're really very skilled at releasing this packaging, you're going to inevitably tear it and it's going to be a little bit damaged. So moving on to the figure itself, I have to say this is pretty much pristine. I think they've done a beautiful job here and I'm very happy with the results. The sculpting for this one must have been a little bit of an uphill challenge for Character Options because what we see of Davros in this story is not particularly clear. Basically, he's a head amidst a lot of wires and they're very unruly and they're all over the place, and obviously we're not able to get that really fine detail here, but what we can see is they've actually done a pretty decent job of replicating what we see on screen. It's not exact, but for this scale it's very good. So I think that there's a lot of detail here. There's a lot of brilliant paint apps as well, and I think we have to give them credit for that. The number of washes going over the head to really draw out all those crannies and cracks and all the rest of it, I think just looks really very good. And then the wires, there's actually some really bright colourful reds and yellows here, which really brings this to life as well. So I think, given a very tricky sculpt, they've done a very good job with it, and I think this looks really good. The figure only has one point of articulation, and that is the sliding hood of the dome, which is pretty cool, and I have to say, I've always really loved this design. Of course, it harks back to the Emperor Daleks that we see in the comic books from many years ago. So it's a loving nod in the TV show, and I think it just looks brilliant in action figure form. As for the skirt, there's really not too much to write home about here. This is pretty much an Imperial Dalek through and through. There's not much to differentiate it, but it looks great. I really love this colour scheme on these Daleks. I think it looks absolutely brilliant. And of course, as you would expect, underneath is the standard 3 wheels that we see on all the Daleks from Character Options. And of course, this means that the figure can move forwards and backwards and side to side, and there's plenty of mobility here. And before I wrap up for today, I thought it might be fun to do a quick scale comparison to see how Emperor Davros stands next to an Imperial Dalek, and as you can see, this looks pretty much on point to me. I like that he's a little bit taller, and it looks pretty overbearing, which is quite nice. Here he is standing next to the 7th Doctor, and interestingly, the 7th Doctor just manages to just pick Emperor Davros to the post there. He's just ever so slightly taller than him. I don't know whether that's screen accurate, because the two never share a scene together in the sense that they're in the same room, so really difficult to know if that's accurate or not. It doesn't seem quite right, but hey, I could be completely wrong on that. Nevertheless, it doesn't spoil the effect. And then here we have the Special Weapons Dalek, which is a little bit more squat and smaller, and I think we have a pretty fun range here, which looks really nice. Okay, so I'm going to give this figure 4 stars, and I've debated whether to give this 3 or 4. On the one hand, there's not an awful lot to this figure. It feels more like a statue than an action figure. As we've seen, there's not really much going on in the way of articulation. There's no accessories to speak of, and it kind of just sits there. On the other hand, I do think that is what this is. There's not really too much more they could have done with it. I think what they have done is pretty much pitch perfect, really. I can't imagine it being done any better than this, and I think they've done a pretty fantastic job all round. And for me, this is one of those releases I desperately wanted them to finally reissue, and I'm so glad that they did. So I'm very, very grateful, and I think this looks absolutely fantastic, and I'm really glad to have it in my collection. And as you can see here, we have a pretty healthy range of various figures from this particular story, and when you put them together like this, don't they just look absolutely fantastic? I think so, but as ever, please do share your thoughts in the comments. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please do consider giving the video a like. That kind of thing really does help the channel out, and it allows me to keep making more content. And if you're interested in seeing more content, remember to hit subscribe, as there'll be plenty more videos coming soon.